morning, everyone. Sorry I'm late. It's a run over from Northland. It's quite a jog. Changed clothes on the way and everything. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Matty Taus. I'm the lead pastor here at Epiphany Station, and I'm excited for us to jump into week 3 of our teaching series called Connecting. But before we do, I want to let you know about something that's maybe a little bit different at Epiphany from any way you might have walked into before. If you have experience with church, then we don't actually take an offering or do giving in a traditional sense of passing a plate. What we really like to do is to promote self-motivated giving. So if you are a person that wants to be generous towards God with your finances, or you want to support the mission and vision of Epiphany here, you can do that in a few ways. We have online giving at epiphanystation.com, and you can even set up recurring giving there if you wish. We have a tablet with a card reader out by the Next Step station, and you can also use the 2 red boxes. They're at the back of the worship space today if you want to choose to do that. We are a few weeks out from occupying our new church home, our new facility out on Main Avenue. So with that comes some kind of like last-minute curveballs and expenses and things we really want to do to finish it as much as we can, get the things like the worship space and the kitchen and eKids really where we want it to be. So if you're in a place of being able to be generous towards that project, you have the means, we would love to invite you to do that and be a part of kind of this last push to get us our new home sorted out. So thank you very much for all that. Now, I want to jump into what we're talking about this morning. So this week, we're in week 3 of Connecting, and what we've been doing through this entire series is seeking to talk about what the greatest connection is. In your existence, all the days of your life, what the greatest connection you could ever make would be. And we're working on the biblical kind of preposition that the greatest connection you could ever make would be to make a connection with God, to make a connection with the creator of all things, the sustainer of all things, and the ender of all things. That's the greatest thing that we can make. It really comes out of Jesus' explanation of the greatest thing you can do with your life is to love God and to love people. So making that connection becomes crucial. So in week 1, we talked about what that looks like. To make a connection with God not based on what we can do and being perfect, but what he's already done to offer a relationship to us and then how we respond to that. So if you missed that message or any other ones that you want to go check out, you can go to epiphanystation.com and find them all under the Watch tab. And last week, we really cemented this idea that we're going to chase down how to connect with God. And we talked about prayer, authentic, genuine prayer, what it looks like to connect with God so that we might not just get what we want, but so that we might be changed by him and have a different view of the world we're going out into. And all of this really stems from the foundation that we believe that God is not far from anyone. God is not far from any of his created, any human beings, and he is ready, waiting, poised to have a relationship if we're ready for it, if we're ready to ask, if we're ready to submit. And he's ready to satisfy every need we could ever have. So what we're going to talk about today is how we connect with him in a different way. We're going to talk about worship. And specifically, we're going to talk about musical worship, the playing of music, the singing of songs. What is that all about? Because if you've never been to church before and it kicks off with some music, you got to think, why? Why would people do that? Is it just because the sermon's so boring, they've got to pad it on both ends with something entertaining? What's the purpose of all this? And trust me when I say, it's going to be boring. But often when you have conversations, if you've been in church long, conversations about worship are usually about the how of worship. Like, how should we worship? What is genuine, pure worship? Where do we worship? When do we worship? And a lot of these are really good conversations to have. Honestly, there's nothing wrong. They're really good conversations to have so we understand worship in its execution. But one of the things that's often missing from the conversation is why. Why would a Christian, why would a believer, why would anyone who wants to love God and love people, why would they sing a song? Like just baseline level, why would you ever want to sing a song? What's that got to do with connecting with God and connecting with people? That's the conversation that we're going to have today. Now, worship by definition is kind of declaring your reverent honor for something. Anything. It can be for a deity, it can be for an object, it can be for a person, but it's you displaying honor to that thing and making it more important in your life and in the world around you. Now, we honor all sorts of things. We honor things by celebrating them, by remembering them, and by recognizing them. Now, when it comes to celebration, there's some no-brainers of things that as a culture and as individuals we celebrate. And it's just some of the things that I see is we celebrate things like graduation. We celebrate well done. You went through this, you struggled, you maybe worked hard, but you got through it, you graduated. So we celebrate that person for that. Nothing wrong with that. And then there's also times in which we might, celebrate things like a candidate being elected. Sometimes we do, sometimes we don't, but we celebrate, this is who I wanted to lead us through the next season. I'm really excited, so we have a big celebration when that person gets the victory. Also, what I've noticed is that we have this tendency to celebrate 50 to 100 grown men running up and down a field with a ball that's the wrong shape, and then every so often we just raise our hands and say it's all good. And I don't really get that one so much. Much more prefer a graduation party. But often, in honoring things, we honor them because we want to remember them. And sometimes we remember things because we miss it, or it marked a huge occasion. Like we remember people in memoriam. We remember people as a nation, maybe, that sacrificed for our well-being. We remember individuals that are no longer with us. We remember them. We mark the date on the calendar. We also remember things like anniversaries. Maybe the anniversary of the foundation of a nation, of its freedom, of a great struggle being finished. We also remember usually the anniversary of the beginning of great struggle, like marriage. And if you don't remember it, the struggle will become worse and worse and worse for you. There are also some things we recognize, and we maybe don't celebrate, we maybe don't remember, but we recognize these things. Things like the ends of wars. Things like recognizing Martin Luther King Day. Things like recognizing 9/11. And these things, if you recognize them, we do that because they're important to us. We observe that day or that event or that person because that was important to us in our identity or whatever it might be. Basically, we honor those things. And the direct parallel to why we would honor those things, why we would recognize, remember, or celebrate them, can be found in why we would ever sing a song to God. Because these things that we might recognize and remember, these are great to us. These are important to us. They're great in our sight. And that's why we would ever sing a song, why we would ever sing a song of celebration, remembrance, or recognition towards God. And if we don't have the why, if you don't have the why, it's going to make no sense. The same reason that people celebrate certain holidays and you're like, what are you doing? That's ridiculous. It's the same for people of why sing a song if you don't understand why it should be done? If there's no why for worshiping God, no why for singing to Him, then conversations about how and what and when are pointless. Instead, we have a baseline conversation to have that doesn't matter if your first time in church is today ever, or this is your millionth time in church. All of us need to be reminded of this conversation of why we sing and why we worship God. So what we're going to do today is we're actually going to dig around through a chunk of text in the Bible that gives us direction of why we sing. And it's in 1 Chronicles chapter 16. If you have a Bible with you, you can go there now. If you don't, Bible app on your phone, or the text will be on the screen behind me, and you can jot down notes if you so wish. But in 1 Chronicles, we get this lovely picture, this really quite full picture of what singing to God and worshiping Him is actually all about. So we're going to start off 1 Chronicles 16, starting in verse 23. You want to track along with me on this one. The author starts out by saying, "Let the whole earth sing to the Lord. Each day proclaim the good news that He saves. Publish His glorious deeds among the nations. Tell everyone about the amazing things He does. Great is the Lord. He is most worthy of praise. He is to be feared above all gods. The gods of other nations are mere idols, but the Lord made the heavens. Honor and majesty surround Him. Strength and joy fill His dwelling. O nations of the world, recognize the Lord. Recognize that the Lord is glorious and strong. Give to the Lord the glory He deserves. Bring your offering and come into His presence. Worship the Lord in all His holy splendor." Now what you have there is the why. Beautifully summarized why anyone would ever, and specifically why, is found in verse 25. Verse 25 says, and kicks off with, "Great is the Lord." Great. And that's the only reason we ever honor anything, is if it's great in our sight, if it's great and important to us. So in the question of worship, not how and where and what and why, is he great to you? Is he great to you? That will answer for you whether you're going to sing to him or not, whether you're going to worship, whether you're going to understand why there's something good to sing about. And in his greatness, it's not just the word great. The actual Hebrew word that's used here is gadol. And gadol doesn't mean just great. It means bigger. It means bigger, and it means older, and it means higher, and it means mightier. It means greatest. So when the author says great, he's saying greatest is the Lord. He is worthy of praise. And if great is the Lord to you, if great is God to you, then singing to him makes sense. If he's not to another, it's not going to. So our biggest thing that we have to wrestle with when the idea of worship is, how great is the Lord in my sight? How great is he to me? What have I seen of him? What about him amazes me? What about him is majestic and powerful? And it goes into, following that, what the Bible often does, is it doesn't just make this great declaration say, done, we'll see you later, I hope you got that, is it then goes on to the why. So when it says in 25, great is the Lord, he is worthy of all praise, it then goes in verse 26 and says, he is to be feared above all gods. The gods of other nations are mere idols, but the Lord made the heavens. Now, if you remember in our first conversation a couple of weeks ago, we talked about how the reason that God gets to be in control, the reason he gets to make decisions, the reason he gets to offer rescue is because he made it all. He made the heavens, and he made the earth, and he made you. And the fact that he made you is one of the things that makes him great. Every other thing that we could worship, every other idol has been produced by us. We craft it into an idol, or we craft it with our bare hands to be an idol, not him. And he makes you, and you are a representation of how great he is. Not maybe because you're beautiful, or you're smart, or you're talented. If that was the case, very poor representation. But the thing that makes him great is that you exist. The thing that makes him great is that you exist, and he wants you. He wants a desperate relationship. He wants a relationship with you that is based on his affection for you and your simple response. That's what makes our God great. It then goes on in verse 27 to say, look, honor and majesty surround him. Strength and joy fill his dwelling. So not only is he a maker, not only is he to be feared, not only is he unique, but he is strong. And he is the provider and giver of joy. He is majestic and he is worthy because of that. See, we love God not just because of what he can do for us. We love him because of who he is. And he's a representation of every good thing there ever has or ever will be. It's where he's the source. And because of that, we don't worship because he needs it. We worship it's because what he deserves. In verse 28 it says, "O nations of the world, recognize the Lord." Recognize that the Lord is glorious and strong. If you were to take the Bible and you were to read this thing, or you were to talk to a believer, you were to go to church your whole life, everything God has ever been trying to do is to help you recognize. Is to help you recognize the truth that he is so much greater than I am. He is so much greater than you are. The whole purpose is to see through what distracts and see his beauty and see his majesty. So it says, give the Lord the glory he deserves. Bring your offering and come into his presence. Worship the Lord in all his holy splendor. If we recognize, it will lead us to worship. If God is great, we will sing to him. Now, a little tangent caveat here is when we first, when we had our first child, all those years ago, it feels like decades. I used to be much younger looking than this, less gray in the beard. And when my firstborn was about a year old, Jackie and I started looking into like the big television debate and screen time and stuff. Like, should you do a little bit, a specific? And we found this one kind of channel. It's called Baby First, I think. And it did specific like 1-year-old, 2-year-old, 3-year-old TV shows that were supposed to help with the whatever. Also, he was a very needy child, so we needed some breaks. But anyway, we ended up finding this one episode that Jackie and I just hated with a fiery passion. It was called Vocabulary, and it's this parrot. His name's Larry, and he just says the same word over and over again for like 3 minutes. But the fact that we hated it didn't matter because Vladimir loved it. With a fiery passion, he loved it. So it became our favorite too. And we didn't have to teach him to love it. Something happened in which when that music started, when the intro got going, nothing else existed in the world to him. He could have just cut his finger off and that show comes on and he's good to go. And he's just so happy and he's vibrant and he's trying to sing and say the words and he's moving his body around because right there and then at 1 year old, that show was great to him. It was huge. It was a massive part of his entire existence. And you don't have to teach a kid to be excited about their favorite TV show coming on. Just like you don't have to teach a kid that to be excited about maybe going to the park or going to get a treat. They've experienced it before, so it's great to them. And they're just thrilled and excited to do it. You don't have to train or to teach a fan to celebrate their team. You don't have to train somebody and teach them how to fall completely head over heels in love. We often try and guard and stop that kind of stuff. But there's some of these great connections that you don't have to teach. They happen because you experience them, because it's great to you, because it's important to you. So when we talk about singing, if God is great to you, if He is worth loving, if He's worth cheering, if He's worth singing to and about, it'll be natural for you to want to sing. If you see Him as good or strong or as a rescuer of your salvation, provider of hope or joy or peace, then wanting to sing will come more naturally to be able to see the depths of the why we would ever worship. So when we get that, when we recognize that, we worship. And specifically, we sing. So I don't know what your background with church songs and hymns and music and worship is at all. But it's never meant to be stale. It was never meant to be, this is what we do, and this is how we do it. This is why there is no one way to do it. Because it is your expression of the why. It's your expression of knowing that God deserves it and you recognize why you would do that. So don't allow worship to be stale wherever you go. If it is to you, you're missing something, one of the most beautiful connections that you could ever make. But if we were to ever get to that point, maybe just with an inkling of, maybe God is great. Maybe He is deserving of worship. The question is, what do we do next? Like, how do we connect to this idea of singing songs to Him, past the why and the motivation, into the specifics? Well, for the next 10, 15 minutes, that's what we're going to talk about. And we have these things called next steps, things that we believe if we're to do and engage in, they will help us love God and love people better and better. And when it comes to worshiping, singing to God, the first step to take is to connect to Him in worship, to connect to Him. Because whether we like it or not, loving God does mean singing to Him. Now, one of the more popular mentalities towards what worship is really hitting hard on there. Well, worship's not just singing. Like, worship is how you work at your job and how you provide and how you give and serve and teach and speak. Like, that's all worship, the decisions you make. And they're right. There's nothing wrong with that. But you can't lose in there that singing is worship. That singing is one of the most beautiful outward expressions of how we show God and others that we love Him. A lot of people might say, well, that singing thing is just not for me. Like, I'll work as worship and I'll give as worship, but singing, that's not really my jam. Well, tough luck. It's God's jam. It's how He wants to connect with His kids. So in 1 Chronicles 16:23, it says, let the whole earth sing to the Lord. In the Bible, there's over 400 references to singing with 50 commandments to sing. The longest book of the Bible, the book of Psalms, is a book of songs to be sung to Him, often with directions of how to sing and with what instrument. Singing is important to God. It is not something that we could ever remove. But why? Why do we feel awkward about it? Honestly, what's tough about the idea of singing? I think the reason we don't want to sing sometimes to God in worship are the reasons we have to. The reasons it's necessary. Now, I kind of, decided I was going to have a real relationship with God about 7, 8 years ago. And it still took me about 4 years to sing, to genuinely sing, to genuinely be connected with God in worship. So what is it, and I don't want to be sexist or anything, but what is it especially that I know in conversation, what is it about dudes that have that problem? A lot of females do too, so I'm not belittling that, but a lot of guys have this issue. I want to speak to you specifically. Why do we struggle as men to open up our mouth and sing in worship to God? Why do we as women struggle to do that? Why do we as human beings have a difficulty with the idea that we would sing in worship to God? Beyond the fact that you could be a terrible singer. Not like me. I have a beautiful voice. Not appropriate to laugh at that point. That was not an applause moment. Why is it difficult for us? What's holding us back from wanting to sing openly, passionately, loudly even? And I think it's the thing that singing to God is created to battle and combat. I think the thing that singing is for us to vocalize that He is great and I am not. And that is why it's so difficult, because in the deepest, darkest, ugliest part of you, of me, I want worship. I want a standing ovation. I want people to clap. I want people to think I'm great and to think me worthy of praise. That's the ugliest part of any human being. And it leads to every decision you'll ever make to put God to one side and to go your own way. Because I want to be God. So the idea that you would open your mouth and sing to Him is in complete denial of that ugliness. It's in complete removal of me better than Him, and it's saying God is great. And that is why it's so difficult. You rarely access that level of vulnerable affection, even for your spouse or your kids. Never mind God. To be able to say that He is greater than I am puts death to your pride. It belittles your ego and your arrogance. So more often than not, we don't feel like doing that. But we have to. It's how we connect in an authentic relationship with God, where we understand He is here and I am there, and that's why we worship, because of His greatness. And only God deserves that kind of worship. Only God deserves to be elevated in that way. And if God is great in your eyes, you will sing to Him. It might not be today. It might be 4 years from now, but if He grows in greatness to your eyes where you are less than Him, you will be able to sing to Him. One of the unique things about worship is that if God is great in your eyes, you will not only want to sing to Him, you will want to sing about Him. And this is kind of the other side of the coin of why we worship together. Is that the second next step to take is both to connect with Him, but then to connect Him to others. And that's why we sing some of our songs more specifically about God than to Him. Because if He's great, we'll want to declare that to the world. So in verse 23 and 24, it does start out and it says, "Let the whole earth sing to the Lord. Each day proclaim the good news that He saves. Publish His glorious deeds among the nations. Tell everyone about the amazing things He does." There's this obvious distinction between singing to Him and then singing about Him. And singing to everybody else, letting them know, declare amongst the earth what He has got going on. And this is one of those beautiful moments that happens so often, where in the Bible or in anything to do with God and loving people collide. And they become inexplicably connected. Because the most loving thing we can do is to tell God that we love Him and to worship Him. The most loving thing you can ever do for a person is let them know they can be loved by Him. It's to let them know that He loves and He cares and He rescues and all the amazing things that He does. It's why we sing songs like My Victory and Death Arrested and Made Alive and Day by Day and Scandal of Grace, our last worship song there. Because we proclaim and we publish and we tell God saves. God saves from separation. God saves from sin. God saves from death. He saves from addiction, aimlessness, hopelessness, lovelessness. That's what He does. And that's why we get together to sing about it, to sing that into each other's lives, to sing that into the life of someone who's maybe just checking this whole God thing out. We connect him to others. And that's one of the reasons that we have every week Wyatt lead us in worship and teach us how to worship, so that we understand that this is something that is good and it is beneficial for us. In the same way that I try and lead you into God's word and we talk about it and what it means for our lives, that's what Wyatt's trying to do. It's what any of our worship leaders want to do. It's to show you the beauty of worship. And in that, it's to declare to us that it's not just for here. If the only time you're in the Bible, the only time you're talking to God is here on a Sunday morning, it's as bad as the only time you're worshiping is here today. You're missing out on 6.5 days a week of connection opportunity with your God. And that's why there's no one way to worship. There's no one place to worship. There's no one person to lead worship. It's supposed to go everywhere so everyone sees it in every way. That's why God doesn't prescribe what worship is supposed to look like, because it's supposed to connect with everyone, everywhere we go. Singing songs, telling of what God has done in our lives. And if God is great, you'll want to sing about him. The third step and the third kind of reason that we choose to sing songs to God is to connect God directly, to connect him to my life today. To connect him into what is going on. It's why we sing different types of songs. Some of them are what we call laments, which basically say the world sucks and my life is terrible. And that's okay. And sometimes we sing beautiful songs of declaration about how amazing he is or what he's done for us. Because we get to connect God not only into what he says is true, but how that true impacts me personally. You see, God created music. And he created singing. And he's already written the last song that will ever be sung. It's not that music is bad, because some of it is. Or that singing is awful, because some of it is, especially in that seat over there. 9:30, 11 a.m. Come see the show. God created music. And he also created emotion. And he created music to drive and pull out of us the very depths of our heart through emotion. So we could express it, and so we could feel it. When you sing any song, it has a tendency to connect with you emotionally. It's when we sometimes get a little raw. It's also the reason that the national anthem isn't said, it's sung. Because music is supposed to move. It's how it was created. It was to move us. And a national anthem of any country is supposed to move people towards national pride. That's why it's sung. Even not being an American, I hear your national anthem and I get chills down my spine when people are singing it together because it's supposed to move. It doesn't matter if you're listening to a love song. Love songs will move you to either recognizing an emotional need you have or a desire to express it. It doesn't matter if it's a fight song that moves you towards aggression or digging deeper or working harder. These things move us, and worship is designed to move us to love God. It's supposed to move us to love him more, not just with the mind, but with the heart and the soul. And it connects it all together in a way that we beautifully express by what he's given us to give, how much we love him. So if God is great in your eyes, if he's done something for you, singing back to him about that is what you've been given to connect your emotions to his. And the greatest thing that we have to sing about is what he's done. Not what we need, or not necessarily what's on our plate today. The greatest thing we have to sing about is what he's already done. And in 1 Chronicles 16, we go a little bit further, a few verses from where we stopped. And in verse 34, we see what is worth praising him for. It says, "Give thanks to the Lord, for he is good. His faithful love endures forever. Cry out, save us, O God of our salvation. Gather and rescue us from among the nations so we can thank your holy name and rejoice and praise you. Praise the Lord, the God of Israel, who lives from everlasting to everlasting." And all the people shouted, "Amen," and praised the Lord. That's the greatest thing he's ever done, is offer salvation and rescue from it all. From every pain and every hardship and every dumb thing you've ever done. Is he says, I'm going to give you the opportunity to put that to one side. And the greatest thing you can ever know and ever express back to him in worship is that the knowledge that he stands ready to have relationship with you. He stands not far but close, ready at a moment's notice to be accepted as your salvation. And the person who will lead you into a life that is going to be beautiful. That's what he does. He saves, he rescues, he's great. And whether you're going to sing about that or not will always depend on, is that true? Can he do that? Is he great enough? Will I sing? I want to invite you to do that with us right now.